Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and this is the Muddy Waters Podcast, and I am your host. And the Muddy Waters Podcast, as we say every time, is we exist because the waters of Maine politics, national politics, are muddy. And our goal here is to, through bringing on good guests who have knowledge and expertise and are involved in the political process and or business owners or different things like that, to help you understand a little bit more about what's going on in the muddy waters that are the world of Maine politics and help you navigate what we can do as the people to try and make our way forward. So part of how we do that, again, is we bring on some guests. And today we have with us a couple of people from the organization Maine Right to Life, the executive director, Mike McClellan, as well as Heather Sirocki, who I believe is, I don't know if she's the chair of the board, but on the board there. So thank you guys for joining us.
Hey,
Heather,
Chuck.
you're the
Welcome.
chair of the board. Is that what we said?
Yeah, that's an upgrade. I'm the secretary.
Oh, you're the secretary. Okay. Sorry.
Very important.
People may not
Yes.
know this, or if they paid attention, they might, but we have actually had one of the other board members on one of our previous episodes. If I'm not mistaken, Chris Parker, right? She's on the board as well.
Right.
We mostly focused on her work with Turning Point USA and, how to help reach younger people and get younger people involved. But so is a second board member from Maine Right to Life that we've had on here. So thank you guys for joining us. And so to kind of get started, if we take each person, we'll have some time to talk a little bit about what I know. Mike, I met you a number of years ago when I was running for office, and you were working at the time for the Christian Civic League of Maine, and you provided some advice to help me figure out what I should be focusing on. So I appreciate that. But you used to be working there. But what's your what's your history? How did you get to this place of working for Maine Right to Life, and what's your involvement historically in politics?
Well, I like to talk, so that's a pretty loaded question. What's my history? Sadly, and thanks, Chuck, I appreciate it. I said to you off camera that this is really an impressive podcast. You are really getting movers and shakers on. I guess I'm giving Heather and I maybe some credit there, but you've had some really great podcasts recently, so thank you for the invitation. Sadly, I'm actually from New York, but I met my
Sorry
wife.
To hear that.
Not a Yankee fan, though. I met my wife at a summer camp. We both were working during our college years in New York. She was living in Maine, and eventually I chased her back to Maine. Came to live in Portland, and then moved within a year to Raymond, where I live now, and just kind of a normal life. My background is actually therapeutic recreation. And so I worked in the streets of Portland with homeless people, with people with mental illness, and some other, issues early in my career. And that the leadership skills I learned in college moved me into things like running a chamber of commerce, and then and consulting, and ultimately running for state office. But even before that, as we settled into Raymond and had 2 children, boy and a girl, and just lived a normal Maine life and loved it. My wife was very encouraging in terms of being involved in the community. So she would suggest things like, why don't you go volunteer in our kids' classroom, which I did for both of them. Why don't you run for the school board? Why don't you get involved with the PTA? And it, moved on from school board to select board. Coached most every sport that they offer in Raymond, just like a lot of people do. And got on things like the recycling committee. So I was really pretty involved in my community. Love living in Raymond. Beautiful place still. Great school system. And what I had always kind of said, Chuck, was, if it ever gets to that thing about putting signs on people's lawns, you can count me out. I don't want to put my name on people's lawns. But somehow I got coerced into running for the Maine House, and had to put signs on people's lawns, and I was elected. And just for context, I was elected in the 2009 election, which meant that I was in that Republican class of 2010 that Governor LePage led, and which I think is the only 2 years, Heather can correct me, probably since Nixon, that Maine was led by a governor, a House, and a Senate that was Republican. Quite an experience. We could do a whole podcast just on that and what went on there. But ultimately, as that wound down for me, I got an opportunity with the Christian Civic League, as you mentioned earlier, to be their policy director about a little more than a year after I had gotten out of the State House, and did that for 8 years. Great experience again, and got to know a lot of new representatives, but also work with people that I had served with, people that were still around. And ultimately, kind of the end of the story or the beginning of the story is right before Thanksgiving, I found out totally unexpectedly that my position was being ended. Just found out that no inkling that was going to go. Kind of a shock, kind of surprised. And the only thing that I decided to do was I had a committee of board members that included quite a few people, and it included two people in the community, one being Heather Sirocki. And I just thought, well, they didn't want to make this public yet, but I was going to call these two people to let them know because they had been really good volunteers for me. So I called my friend Penny and I called Heather and just said, hey, I'm done here. Just wanted to thank you. And it was just kind of funny. Both of them said, gosh, Mike, Maine Right to Life has been looking for an executive director for quite a while. And it started a long process, couple weeks at least, where my wife and I talked with them, and my wife and I chewed on it and thought about it and thought of all the reasons why maybe I shouldn't do it, because maybe it was time to get done with politics, and then thought obviously the reasons why I should do it. And ultimately the amazing board, which probably we won't get much to talk about today, but the amazing board of Maine Right to Life just swayed me into doing this. And I started January 1st, so I am brand spanking new. And, hopefully I'll get a chance to just share after Heather speaks about why I'm so excited about this new role.
Yeah, no, we definitely look forward to that. But we also do, as you said, want to hear like Heather's story, how she got to be at this place. And it's worth noting at this point that there is no technical no technical problem happening at this point. But Heather doesn't have the ability to have camera on. But we just want to hear like what I guess what got you involved. I know that you and I both serve on the board for the Cumberland County Republican Committee. You've been involved there, but like what got you involved in politics and got you to be to the place where you're on the board for Maine Right to Life?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm just like Mike, pretty average, ordinary person, just actually doing some extraordinary things that the average person can do.
Hmm.
And I grew up in Massachusetts till I was about 10, moved to Maine when my dad got a farm 2 miles down a dirt road with no running water, no electricity. And my dad was back to the lander, and went on to become a dental hygienist and worked for 38 years in the same
Wow.
dental office in South Portland. And my husband and I met in Portland and moved to Scarborough and raised our 3 boys there. I was involved in about every booster group you can imagine, academic decathlon, band boosters, gym dandies, children's circus, Sea Scouts, you name it. And so I had a lot of name recognition, but I had absolutely no business running for office. I had never run for anything. I have hair for radio. I always wear a hat. The hair is out of control. And and there was no opponent on the ballot. And I had been a longtime Democrat, and I joined a mother's club, and we read the book John Adams, and I don't know why, it's just something just clicked there, and I said, I'm in the wrong party. I don't believe in anything that these people think. And so I became a Republican in 2005, and sort of like a reformed smoker can be much more strongly voiced in their opposition to smoking. I guess as a reformed Democrat, I became a stronger Republican. And I didn't like the fact that the person on the ballot was going to just walk in without any opposition. So I thought, well, I took a placeholder spot in July, got my palm cards in September, elections in November. I was never supposed to win. Charlie Webster was the chair of the Republican Party at the time, and he said, absolutely not. You'll get no money from us. You're not going to win. And I said, well, I'm just a name on the ballot, and it gives me the opportunity to campaign for Paul LePage. I wanted him to be the governor. So I passed my stuff out at the same time, and next thing you know, I win. So I was literally so terrified. I lost about 20 pounds. I couldn't
Ooh.
eat from
Wow.
November to January. I was just terrified. This was nothing I really wanted to do ever. And so I got reelected and termed out 8 years later. And fast forward, Karen Vachon, I had served with Karen. She was also a state rep from Scarborough. And she did not win reelection on her third term. And she called me, and they needed a secretary for Maine Right to Life, and would I just fill in temporarily? So it's sort of my story is, I'm not supposed to really do this for very long. I'm just like a name on the ballot. I'm just a temporary fill-in secretary. And next thing you know, I'm still there.
Wow.
So I am still the secretary of Maine Right to Life, and that's the position I like. It's a position not everyone likes. Most people like to be the vice chair, and that's kind of an easy role to just fill in, just in case. But secretary has to really be there at the meetings if at all possible, and pay attention and take the notes. So that's what I like to do, and that's been my role for a lot of different things I've been involved in. So the issue became more and more passionate to me the more that I learned about it and read about it and got involved with the organization. And I grew up in the 1970s. So in high school, I remember the discussions about Roe v. Wade. And again, as a Democrat, I was pro-abortion. I was pro-choice. And then as I got older and had my own children, my own family, I became much more queasy about the whole idea. And it it was probably a long, slow process for me to become so pro-life. It was not a quick thing for me. And I think the more that people are educated and understand, the better. And I also remember the it was the safe, legal, and rare argument with Roe v. Wade.
Mm.
Well, for once you get into legislature, you realize it is not safe. We do not have laws to protect women in the state of Maine having abortions. Abortion clinics are not licensed. They are not
Mm.
inspected. And after reading the Dr. Gosnell situation in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, that clinic, it is so horrifying.
Mm.
And after working in a dental office for 38 years and working in an office that was, let's say, substandard and really should have been inspected, um, you realize how important it is. And I'm a Republican, and I don't believe in a lot of overregulation, over licensing, and that kind of thing. But when we're talking public safety, people can get very sick and die when places like this are not clean and safe. And knowing they're going to be inspected does put a different level of paying attention by the staff.
Yep.
And I just think that that issue, the safety issue, just wasn't there for me. Now in Maine, people that are not doctors can perform abortions. So you have non-doctors doing this. That is very dangerous. You have chemical abortions now where people can mail order and do-it-yourself
Yep.
abortions. Again, extremely dangerous, because if you have an ectopic pregnancy or some other physical anomaly in your body, and you've not been examined by a professional, and you begin this process on a Friday night thinking you're going to do your chemical abortion over the weekend and go to work on Monday, and you run into trouble, good luck with that.
Mm.
It's not an abortion situation, but a horrifying story I heard from a friend that recently their couple, the wife had a kidney stone problem and needed to be admitted to the hospital. This is at Maine Med. And they got the woman on a morphine drip, got her comfortable, and said to the husband, well, we have to release her. We don't have a bed. And the husband's like, what are you talking about? You have to treat her. And they said, no, we don't have a bed. She's got to go home. And the doctor said, excuse me, but I'm a retired doctor. I'm on the board here. You will see my wife.
Mm.
And that's what the level of what we are, where we are in healthcare is scary to me. And if you're a woman that has trouble, with an abortion, following an abortion, or anything dealing with it is not safe. So this is the safe. It is legal now, right up until due date. So that to me is horrifying as
Yeah.
well. This is not an early decision that's made in the first 3 months. We're talking later, much later term abortions now. And it's not rare. 2,500 babies were aborted last year in Maine. That's about 6 a day. That is not rare.
Yeah.
And we already are the oldest average state in the country. We need babies. We need our young population. And one of the reasons you only see older faces at all these meetings and so forth is the babies are not born. They don't exist. They're not here.
Hmm.
So I think the Roe v. Wade situation was a win to correct a really bad decision that had been made in 50 years ago, 1973. But it put a lot of responsibility on each state and the legislators and the legislatures making decisions around the country. Each state has made different decisions, and Maine, unfortunately, has made some very progressive decisions. And I personally think there's nothing sadder than a woman who thinks her best option, her only option, is to kill her child. That is a poor reflection on us as a country, as a society, that that a woman thinks that this is the way to go.
Well, yeah,
And
I
what
think
we
even
should be
I think they're
focusing
trying to
on.
say is that this is like her only option in this situation is the way that it seems to be presented. But continue. Sorry.
Right. So I think Main Right to Life is trying to change hearts and minds and help educate the general public and people like me to understand that there are other options, one, and that unborn being has a
Mm.
right to life, and to recognize that that baby is alive and growing and deserves to live. And if we can get people to not think of it as detached, horrifying descriptions as the baby is a parasite. Are you kidding me? I mean, that is, um,
Yeah.
just some of the descriptions are just horrible, and that language needs to change. And the I think the tide is shifting. I've talked to my sons about this, and yes, white males, um, but they're horrified at this. They don't support this, and there are a lot of grieving and suffering men out there that have no place to go because their girlfriends or wives or whatever have decided to abort their children, and they feel like they can't say anything or do anything about it. And that's a sad situation too. So instead of bragging and using abortion as some kind of rite of honor or a rite of passage, or some of the things that I see young people sort of referring to this as, I'm not saying it should be shameful, but it's sad. It's just very sad.
Yeah, the discussion has gotten very, very toxic, especially. I mean, like a lot of things from the left at this point, the Democrats, the conversation is very toxic. If you don't agree, if you don't support, a woman's right to choose, as they say, then you're sexist, you're a bigot, and like and it, also the language around it is you're kind of saying, like the words that they're using to describe the growing child are just disgusting and despicable. So it's helpful to hear your story to kind of understand how you kind of came to this place. And I think one of the things I find interesting too, just for talking about politics and how people get involved in politics, Mike went the what they would call the traditional way of starting to get involved at the low level, and then eventually running for for a state position. Whereas Heather, you just jumped right in, and I think sometimes people are like, because like it doesn't sound like you were involved in school boards or city council or anything like that. that. You
No,
just ran. And so
no.
it's interesting because sometimes people are like, this is the model, this is what you need to follow. And
Right.
the truth is that it's not as cookie cutter as sometimes people make it out to be. But yeah,
And something Heather said really struck me from my time as a legislator. See if she agrees with me. Um, we found a barrier to people participating or running was they thought legislators were special. They were smarter or they had more skills and all that. And hey, I was one, so I can tell you, they're just regular people. Anybody listening here, you've got to work hard and there's a lot of reading. It's incredible how much you have to read, but anybody can do this. For the most part, the legislators are not any better or any worse than any of us.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting to see
Mhm.
on the national level. I think it's a really important point that you're making. But like this is kind of playing out as we see all these confirmation hearings, right? Where these people are being super critical about somebody's credentials when the people who are asking the questions don't have anywhere near the credentials of the people that
Sure.
they're grilling. And I had we had Jerry Lehman on, and we from NEFSA right here, New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association, and like if you want to talk about somebody who's an expert in their field, he is an expert in his field, right? And the legislators who are making the decisions, and then the people that they're appointing through NOAA, the career bureaucrats who work in the as I think Vivek Ramaswamy called it, the fourth branch of government that was not in the Constitution, the administrative state. They also are not experts. They're just they're maybe they went to school for stuff, but most of your people who are serving in office don't actually have credentials. But especially here in the state of Maine, that doesn't mean that they don't know anything, but it does mean that this is
Right.
again, it's not rocket science. This is something that anybody can do as long as you can get elected. Sometimes you get in fortunate situations. Well, Heather, I think, might say it was unfortunate initially, but like fortunate situations where you accidentally win. But but yeah, so cool.
Well,
Well, go ahead.
I think that. Mhm. Well, I was just going to say quickly that I think our House and our Senate are modeled after Great Britain's model of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And so I viewed the House of Representatives as the House of Commons. It's supposed to represent the common people, the everyday person. And I thought, well, I fit that bill. So
Yeah.
I had to sort of comfort myself with that. And then when you get there, as Mike said, you quickly realize, yeah, you fit in just fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for serving for when you did, and for what
Sure.
you continue to do to advocate for good policy. I wanted to give you, I think, Heather, the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit more as we were kind of getting started. And again, my initial thought, and you kind of corrected me before we went live, is like, oh, Maine Right to Life. We're going to talk all about abortion, and that's what we've talked about so far, and not abortion and not abortion essentially. But the Maine Right to Life actually is focused on more than just that issue, more than just the pro-life movement. Well, I guess being pro-life is more than just about abortion. So I wanted to give you some
Yeah.
time to talk about what
Right.
what does Maine Right to Life do, and what type of policies do you advocate for aside from the obvious?
Yeah, the Main Right to Life's real mission is womb to tomb. So the unborn, as well as the newborn, as well as people that are suicide, end of life issues. Anything
Yeah.
on that spectrum is what we're concerned about, and really focusing on, again, the right to live, the right to life. And Maine Right to Life is an affiliate of National Right to Life. So there
Okay.
is a national organization, and each state has its own entity, and some of them go by different names, but most of them will use Right to Life in their name. But some of them are, I think, it's Massachusetts Citizens for Life, and some states have slightly different names, but basically all very similar names with in this umbrella. And we focus on educating the public as our primary focus of trying to help people understand um, the state of Maine's laws and how we could improve them. And as legislation is proposed, we do pay attention to see, does this support life? Does this protect life, or does this hurt life? And that's sort of the bottom line. So we also are focusing on things like the Safe Haven Baby Box initiative that Maine Right to Life has, where it helps people safely abandon their baby. In the state of Maine, we have a safe haven law that's been on the books since the 1970s, but we did not have the baby box ability until about 3 years ago, and we've been waiting for the Department of Health and Human Services to promulgate the rules. And so the holdup has been frustrating. And most women that will relinquish their baby will not bring the baby in and directly to the arms of a police officer or a fireman or a doctor. They unfortunately will abandon their babies, and then they frequently die. And so you can Google this, and many stories in other states of babies left in backpacks and dumpsters and
Oh,
just on the side of the road. Or in the
yeah.
state of Maine, we had a situation that happened up in a gravel pit up in Madawaska, that happened to be in a relative of mine's gravel pit. It's very personal, and really they just have uh, terrible memories of that situation. And so having a safe place that's anonymous for a mother struggling, a young mother, usually I would imagine, facing a really difficult situation, for them to be able to anonymously bring the baby and relinquish their baby into a safe place, and then have someone on the other end to quickly get the baby care it needs, and then to place it up for adoption is the goal. And it really baffles me as to why anyone would oppose this or try to
Mhm.
stonewall this, but we have been stonewalled for years on this now. So it's been 4 years, I think, since the law first went in to allow the safe haven baby boxes, and we have the money appropriated for the town of Rumford to get a box. They have it all wired in, they've got it all ready to go. But until we have these rules in place, the town manager is not comfortable with putting the box in. So there are other states that have gone ahead without waiting for any rules to be promulgated, but that's not the situation here. And there have been I can't remember the numbers now, but it's been
Quite a few.
lots of babies have been safely relinquished into these baby boxes. And what's interesting about this is that it's actually centuries old. That it started really in Italy, and the Pope liked the idea so much at the time that he mandated that every single church would have a foundling wheel. And so the baby would be placed on a wheel. You turn the wheel into the church, and the nuns on the inside would hear the baby cry, would come get the baby, get a wet nurse, and then find someone to adopt the baby. And then Napoleon Bonaparte liked it so much, he made it mandatory for all of France. So it's
Wow.
not a new idea. It's an old idea, but this device is, of course, has a lot of technology, and it's got alarms that go off immediately and that kind of thing. And um, so things like that, those are initiatives that we work
Yeah.
on. We also work on testifying in the legislature for and against various bills.
Right.
Yeah.
Let
So
me jump in, Chuck.
yeah, go for it.
First off, isn't Heather's enthusiasm and passion amazing?
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
we could see her right now. Um,
Believe me, I have
so
hair for
just
radio.
she's got great hair. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I don't know. I've got like 4 things. First off, this is my first official act was attending the 50th birthday party for Maine
Mm.
Right to Life. So
Oh,
we've been
wow.
around 50 years. That speaks to itself. I thought I'd mention funding quick because organizations like ours don't take grants and government money. You're not going to find any
Of course.
US aid boxes in our garbage.
Not even close. Yeah.
And the reason for that is because they always come with rules.
Mhm.
And, so we've seen, like, say, Catholic churches where if they accept money, or Catholic hospitals even more so, there's like an expectation they perform abortions. So we're not doing that. We subsist based totally on people who want to support us. And we're actually just started a drive in February, just now, for the new year. So if anybody is interested in learning more about that, they can go to our website. Um, I wanted to mention too that it's an interesting fight. I was thinking about the Super Bowl, and there was this conspiracy theory that the Kansas City Chiefs got all the calls going to this, and you could watch a video and you could say, wow, it really looks like they're getting all the calls. And it didn't seem to happen in the Super Bowl, though. We kind of have the same battle here, in my job now and in my job previous. I'm often called and asked to talk to media on TV, or on audio. And the end result is always they're making a case for the other side, but they want to have one quote from Mike McClellan so they can say it's a balanced story. I can't tell you
Yeah.
how many times I've seen that happen. I just kind of laugh about it. And so that battle results in sometimes the public doesn't realize what we're really talking about and fighting about. They're thinking that we are actually fighting about abortion itself. We're not. We're fighting about babies being born and put on a cold metal table to die in some states.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
media is complicit in not sharing that. And finally, I'll just say about Maine Right to Life. I mentioned earlier about how my life has gone recently, and so I found myself talking to the board members. Heather was one of them, and I think I shared with them my observation, having been around since 2010 and now it's 2025, is that everything in Maine just seems to happen every 2 years, right? I was in the Republican Party and we caucused every day and we did this every day. We did that the Democrats did too. We all kind of wait for the bills to come and then we argue about them. And then if you're in the majority, which tends to be the other side, they win and we lose. And I was really excited because Maine Right to Life, the board was talking to me about getting ahead of that, and that's not easy. It's kind of easy to show up today and argue politics, and we can all do that. It's a little bit harder to say, you know what, science proves our point. What Maine Right to Life believes, science proves it, and we know education proves it. And so we're going to stop just showing up and fighting the bills on February 12th. We're going to start doing things, education, science, that's going to it's going to affect another generation. It may not change my next door neighbor, but we're targeting the kids that are going to someday be the legislators and the school board members and the bus drivers and all that. And that's work. That's it's not just showing up, but that's actually putting a lot of work in. And I can't even tell you how we're going to do all that yet because we're just kind of formulating it. But I'm really excited that we're looking to not just win a bill, but we're looking to change the world. And bring hope back into the world, which has been kind of taken away.
I think that's really important. This idea of being proactive. I think in trying to get out ahead, or I think one of the comments that I had made a number of years ago. I think when Joel Stetkis was initially voted in to be the chair of the party. I mean, I've been thinking this for a while, but I actually had the opportunity to ask him the question when he came to a Portland Republican city committee meeting, and I asked, I said, "What's the long-term strategy?" Because one of the problems that I see of the Republican Party in general is it's very reactionary, right? Like we don't appear from the outside, at the very least, or the inside, I'll say, to have much in the way of a strategy that is other than just reacting to things and talking about the bad things that are happening and have happened in the past. Whereas the other side appears to have a long-term strategy that they've been executing on since the 60s. And so we need to have a proactive strategy. So that's really awesome that you're working on being more proactive. Hopefully our party, the party itself, and I like to point out when I talk about the party, if you're paying attention, that when I say the party, I don't simply mean the official leadership of the Maine GOP, the House Republican leader. I mean, the people. We as a people need to come together. If you are a registered Republican, you are the party. And we all need to take that accountability and responsibility. And that's also a microcosm of being a citizen, right? Who are the people who are governing our nation? We are, and we have a part to play. And so, anyway, I just want to say that. But we do need a strategy, and we need more people to engage to be able to come up with a better long-term strategy, because at the time. And this isn't to throw Joel Stetkes himself under the bus, although the party did this year when we voted him out. And but it is to say that nobody has had that. Like, we haven't had that as a party for a long time. At least I'm I'm newer to politics. I got involved in 2020, paid attention, to a degree, to national politics, but local politics I didn't pay attention to until 2020. And so I'm kind of new to the game, but it doesn't appear to me that we've had a long-term strategy in a long time, and that's kind of a problem. But so it's not just a Joel thing, but he didn't really have an answer at the time. His response was, the typical Republican response was, well, we got to win in 2024. That was the plan. It's like, I mean, long term, like, so. So this gets us into, like, I think a couple of other interesting questions. Obviously, Heather, you already mentioned the huge win that was Roe versus Wade, but in the kind of like aftermath of Roe versus Wade, which some have argued, and there's more to the story than this, but some have argued that the red wave that we expected in 2022 didn't come because of backlash against Roe versus Wade being overturned. And so, but regardless of whether or not that's the whole story, I think voter turnout amongst Republicans is also a huge part of that story. That people miss. But either way, like, there is a lot of backlash in the public sphere, to the point where, in 2024, and Trump himself he called himself the most pro-life president, but he also kind of basically said that he thinks it's a states issue primarily, and whether that was a campaign tactic or there's something more at play, I don't know. But kind of as a result of Trumpism, the national GOP decided that they were going to loosen their stance on, like, whereas historically, I think in order to get Christians to vote for the Republican Party, that the party became pro-life. I don't know that it necessarily was as pro-life before that, but they've kind of taken a step back away from being as pro-life. And I know I was telling you before, Mike, your former employer took a negative stance toward the party as a result of that, which a lot of pro-life people did. And so I just, like, there's a couple of things there that I want to let you guys have an opportunity to speak to. But overall, like, I feel like part of the problem is that we as a people in America have become much less pro-life. And so I'll just let you guys kind of speak to. I said a lot there, so there's a lot. But, like, what do you kind of what happened there in your view, and then what's the path forward, if that makes sense, to try and convince more people that this is a thing that we should be fighting for.
Well, I personally have heard from many people who said, I think the party and candidates need to not talk about abortion at all, because they think that it hurts them and their chances of winning election or re-election. And I would say you could totally muzzle yourself, and the left isn't going to stop talking. So the answer isn't for us to be quiet about it. The answer is for these candidates to get knowledgeable, to get educated, to understand and get comfortable with talking about life issues. Because if you can't articulate it, that will stop you from talking about it. And you're the more that people could listen maybe to a podcast like this, or I thought Christina Parker did a great job with the interview you
Yeah.
did with her, listening to
Yep.
people who are comfortable talking about being pro-life, where their views are, what their stance is, and being able to provide some facts. So we do have fact sheets available through Maine Right to Life that I did distribute to House and Senate leadership. to give to the candidates so that they would have be able to answer questions at the door when they're out campaigning. They may not want to write an op-ed about it, but they should be definitely comfortable talking with people that might throw questions at them. And ignoring it and making pretend it doesn't exist or just running away from it is not going to help.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree there. But go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, boy, and that was a loaded question. And in fairness, you warned us before we started. I worked for a Family Policy Alliance organization, and now I work for a Right to Life organization. Both have almost every state covered. And yeah, that when the candidate President Trump announced what he was intending to do, it wasn't popular. People on our side were not everybody, but a lot of people were. And as I said to you before we started this, it's a lot easier question to talk about now in hindsight versus in that moment. Here's a little scandal for you. I'm not a Republican. I did leave the party, and
okay.
I'm unenrolled or whatever it is. Of course, you can guess how I vote, but I am a Christian. I think it's important to say Maine Right to Life, as I was told, is not a political organization, is not a religious organization, but we work in political and religious fields and areas. So it's kind of from my head. Sometimes my head gets all spinny about that. I was frustrated when President Trump said what he said about abortion, but I had to think of a couple of things. One is, as a legislator, it took me a long time because it takes me a long time to process stuff. But it came to me as I looked to serve God that he didn't send me to be a representative to save Maine or save the world, right? Jesus has already done that in how I look at things. And so I had to realize that when I'm sent somewhere, I'm supposed to do my best job. If I go to the Judiciary Committee and I tell them abortion is bad and please don't do this, and they do it, it really stinks. But I did what I was at. God asked me to go testify. I did it. So it doesn't always feel very satisfying. That's not like, wow, that's great. But that's unfortunately how it is on this planet, that things aren't perfect, and we have hope that the next place is going to be a lot better. Also, I think important to say, and to see if Heather agrees with this, is I think we have to live in reality. So when somebody says, hey, would you put a bill in to just abolish abortion tomorrow? Would I like to do that? Sure. Is that like crazy making though? Because right off the bat, it's not going to win. And secondly, it could even aggravate the other side to put a bill in that could be passed that, is meant as payback. So if you look at my opinion, if you look at this whole abortion since Roe versus even before that, there was for a while an unholy alliance that you stay in your corner, abortion people, life people, you stay, and everybody kind of held their ground. And then, my opinion, the other side started advancing, and it was incremental, and it was little things, and it was little things, and then it got to be bigger, and all of a sudden, Maine arguably isn't that far off from a China, North Korea abortion situation. So unless the voters all get smart and elect all great people, and we're not going to just be able to abolish abortion tomorrow. We're going to have to do it incrementally. And as I said earlier, and as you mentioned also, the whole thing about looking to the future and, and education and science and, preparing younger people. And I think one of the cool things is younger people are getting this. You mentioned Christina Parker. She's just one person. She's great. I know her well, but there's a lot of people that doing the same thing in Maine that are young. And these are the things that are incrementally going to get us back to a place that we can, hopefully make some great change over time. What else do I want to say? in terms of President Trump, you could look at him and you could say, yeah, he put it back to this. And some constitutionalists will say that was exactly what he should have done. Should be a state issue, shouldn't be a federal government issue. I'll leave that to the listener to decide that. What I will say to you is start looking at his cabinet. It's like 95% pro-life people. So he is surrounding himself with people that do know the truth. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I think your comment about incremental, I think is a really good way to put it. Like one of the things that I had commented on when I ran, I'm a pro-life person. I ran, two different campaigns, and I was open about where I stand on this issue. As I went around door to door. 2 years ago, I had a website, and I did not include details of this on the website. This last term, I included that because I felt like the first term, I think I was following a strategy that was, say as little as possible, because your job is to get elected. Your job is not to educate the people. Because and at that point, I thought, number one, that there was going to be a red wave, and I thought that if I hit enough doors, I think I can win this. The reality is, I got 32% 2 years ago, so I was like, what do I have to worry about now? I'm just going to I'm going to be very open with the people about all the areas where I think they will have. They will care, both for people who are for me and people who are against me. I want them to be able to make as educated a decision as possible. And I say all that to say, part of I think the problem, some of what we're being told in terms of campaigning from the party is again, don't say a lot, right? And there's this thing that is said, which is your job as a candidate is to get elected, not to educate. And I think part of the problem there is especially if you're running in some districts where, the odds of me winning if I run again in the same district are actually quite low, especially against going up against a 3-term at that point incumbent in a very Democrat city. The odds are, I'm not going to win that race just because they got the R next to my name. Maybe after, in the term after that, if I'm continuing to run at that point, and now there's somebody new who doesn't have name recognition because I've run 4 terms in a row or 3 terms in a row or whatever, maybe then I've got the name recognition, that with name recognition, a good reputation in the community, and an unknown that I'm running against that has a D next to their name. Maybe I have a chance of winning at that point. But the reality is, part of the problem that we have in our society, we have partly it's because of echo chambers and the fact that we're only talking to people that already agree with us, and we're not engaging in civil discourse, right? When you talk about this is a problem for at so many levels, but it sounds like Heather, you made the comment that you gave people information. I think this is really great, so that they had the information so they could speak in an educated way. But instead, right now, it seems like I'm not against tactics, right? I want to win, right? And so if you're in a close district, you have to be very careful and cautious about how you communicate about these things. But ultimately, I think that what we need to do better in general is communicating and educating the public about what's actually going on in our world, which is why this podcast exists, right? But I think rather than backing away and being maybe verging on dishonesty, and maybe in some cases being outright dishonest on some of these issues, because it's a tactical move, is not the way that we should be going, and standing up and speaking boldly about this is what I believe, and this is where I stand, and this is why. One of the things that I've been really impressed by. I've always, ever since I found Charlie Kirk, I've always enjoyed hearing him talk. But I think a big part of what helped swing this last election is Charlie Kirk, not necessarily just where he was going in person, where he would have conversations with people. And you could tell he was convincing people in those conversations because he knows his stuff. It's like the back of his hand. He knows the details and the data. They'll challenge him on something. He'll be like, nope, here's the facts and here's why, right? He knows what he's talking about, and he's courteous. He's respectful. But he's also boldly speaking truth to people who we again, in our silos, we're not communicating. And that approach, not just him doing it there, I think he, again, like I said, I think he changed minds there, but he also, he went viral. right? Like on TikTok and Instagram, those videos were captured and they went viral, and so many people saw that and are able to share that. And I think that that's something that we can't underestimate, but we need to get back to having civil discourse and having conversation with people who we disagree with. I'll share a fun one, because it's it's one where I was wrong about something, right? And it's because of these silos and these echo chambers. You've probably seen this, but there's there are comments that is actually, people would call this a conspiracy theory, that the different colors on the new pride flag, right, or the quote unquote new pride flag, that are like I think it's the blue, pink, and the white or something like that. That is actually for what are called MAPs. They're trying to redefine the language from pedophile to minor attracted person. When I say there is a segment, it's not the whole pride movement that's trying to do that. And the memes that have gone out have said that those three colors represent on the pride flag minor attracted people. Well, the reality is, and I got fact checked on this, I never said it on the podcast, but I thought that's what I'd been told. And I just thought, and I knew, I have seen language where they are trying to redefine a pedophile to minor attracted person, right? Which obviously we're not in favor of. But the reality is that those three colors actually don't represent that. That was a joke that was put out that went viral. But those three actually represent the transgender community. And so the interesting thing here is that, like, how did I learn that? Well, I learned that because I have a friend who's a liberal and we talk. And do we convince each other every moment? No, but we grow and learn together. And I think both of us benefit from conversation with one another. So anyway, there's all that I would say. And I think that we need to get back to that if we have any hope. And I think that rather than shying away from having these conversations, I think we need to engage these conversations more. And candidates, I've been thinking this a lot because I've been thinking a lot about this strategy. In my mind, it's like, how sometimes you have a computer program and there's something that's working in the background, and that's how my mind goes. Like, there are programs running in the background, and eventually it's it's done, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so I think, like, one of the things that I've been thinking about is that, like, the more bold and honest the candidates represent themselves, those candidates are much more likely, I think, to get support and get elected, even if their opinion is maybe less popular. And so instead of trying to find, because I've been having these conversations, trying to find candidates who are, like, I think it's gone beyond what Heather had said, from saying we need to get candidates to just not talk about this issue, to we need to find candidates that are pro-choice. That's kind of been the conversation, that are Republican but are pro-choice. This has been stuff that you hear in certain parts of the state. And I think what we actually need is just good candidates who are bold and willing to talk about things and are prepared for those conversations. And that's what's going to help us win and move forward. Anyway, that was I gave you a huge diatribe there, but I think that's what we need to do in order to effectively move forward.
Well, at Maine Right to Life, we can't endorse candidates. We can take a position on a bill or issues. And I think that as far as candidate recruitment goes, sometimes they're just any person like me. They couldn't
Do we
find
have a live
anyone.
body?
I was bottom of the barrel. I was very bottom of the barrel. And they didn't have anyone who was a paper candidate, and I just filled in. So sometimes you run into that situation, but a lot of times when they're recruiting, I think they're looking for people who are electable. Are they nice? Nice people tend to say yes a lot. They can't say no, because that's why people like them, because they're always so amenable to things. And I think when you're in the legislature and you're dealing with really difficult issues, you need people who can say no. And I remember someone saying to me once, "How come the lobbyists never bother you? They're always bothering me. They trap them in the hallway. They always want to have coffee with them. They're constantly sending them messages." And I said, "Well, they already know I'm at no. They don't bother wasting their time on me." So if you take a definitive stance, they don't bother with you. And so I think you're right, being bold and just saying who you are lets people know what you stand for. Don't keep them guessing, just be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was involved in my previous position. We did some trainings some years back, and we were looking for candidates. And we went into like Auburn and communities like that. Actually got a pretty good turnout. And it was a 2-day training, and you walked away with a handbook. And we brought legislators in to talk about the experience. And I'll never forget, it happened almost every time. When we'd be done, we'd have 30, 35 people maybe there, and we'd be, saying goodbye. And there would be people that would stand up and say, you know what? Thank you for this. Now I realize I really don't want to run for office. It's not who I am. But now I know how I can help somebody else, how I can help a
Hmm.
Chuck Ellis, you know? And so you go back to my story. I didn't do it on purpose, but basically I was in the schools, I was at Little League. I was a school board member. I mean, I can't say I ever studied Robert's rules and all that, but over time I learned how a meeting runs, how to public speak a little bit, how to use eye contact, the things like that are very sellable. And for someone that maybe is thinking, gosh, and that's what we heard also in our trainings was people say, I'm here, we'd have like 75-year-old people there. I'm here because I just realized it's time. Just things are getting so bad, it's time. And you can kind of get ahead of all that by just participating in your own community. Again, whether it's running for, or even just going to the meetings and supporting the school
Yep.
board and supporting the library associate, whatever your cup of tea is, and just maybe find out that way. It doesn't have to be tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the short version is get involved, and how you get
Get
involved
involved.
is up to you. Some people have said that, like, if you just start going to school board meetings, eventually you'll feel like you can't help but speak up, and then eventually you might run for office, right? But you don't
Yeah.
have to. But being there, being involved, is a huge part of the process. And I know that as conservatives or libertarians or Mainers in general, who are the like, I just want to be left alone crowd, I get it. I would love for you to just be left alone. The Democrats, don't want that. I mean, they're over-regulating our state, and as somebody mentioned earlier, we don't have a problem necessarily with regulation. We have a problem with over-regulation, and right now we're in a place where we have become so over-regulated that it's a huge problem. And then some of the regulations that are in place, such as around life, are not helpful and not healthy. And so anyway, I think get involved though is the first thing, and make your voice heard, because you're going to be impacted by the decisions of what's going on. But the
Yeah,
best way is to
definitely.
get involved at the lowest
Definitely.
level, and work your way up. And if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. But yeah, so one of the other things I feel like, as we probably are getting closer to wrapping up, there's a question that I think is worth asking. And one of the things that, Heather, you had said when you were explaining what Maine Right to Life is, or the Right to Life movement nationally, it's focused from conception to natural death, right? And I think one of the critiques I've heard, and I just wanted to give somebody an opportunity because I'm sure you've heard this and you're ready to respond. But one of the critiques I've heard, of from the left of the pro-life movement, is that basically we want the baby to be born, but we don't care what happens to it afterwards. This is at least the critique that's leveled against us, because we don't. And I think their argument is that we don't support certain social welfare systems that they support. And so, like, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of respond to that accusation and that thing that's kind of leveled against the pro-life movement.
Mhm. Well, I don't know of any pro-life person who wants to eliminate any programs that support mothers or
Hmm.
families. I can't think of anybody who has come out with that as an agenda. I think that that is a red
Hmm.
herring, and that's trying to take us off message as to what we're all about. And I think obviously if you want the baby born, you support families, you support mothers. So our 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 sort of our I guess I'm trying to think of what the word is. It's not our mantra, but it's our slogan or whatever. This year is from National Right to Life, and they have boiled it down to support her, protect them. So I think as a society, as a culture, if we could work on supporting
Mm.
families and supporting pregnant women and protecting the unborn, protecting vulnerable children, that is really important. Now, this has nothing to do really with Maine Right to Life, but one of the bills I worked really hard on in the legislature was to prohibit female genital
Mm.
Yeah.
mutilation.
Yep.
And that bill ultimately failed for reasons that a lot of people don't
Yeah.
understand, but had everything to do with the transgender community because you can't put into policy, into statute, language that would prohibit the removal of genitalia for children. And so people thought it was failed and it was a racist bill and it had everything to do with protecting the Muslim culture because they tend to engage in that activity. Although there are Christians that also do the
Mm.
FGM, but actually it was circling the wagons and protecting the transgender community so that they would be able to have the surgeries to
Mm.
remove genitalia of children. And when we're talking about protecting children, um, they would not protect these innocent children from the FGM procedure in order to safeguard their other agenda of the transgender community. And so we as a culture, as a society here in Maine and around the world, really, we really need to look deep into our hearts and our souls and say, do we really protect children? Do we really? And I think there is some soul searching that really needs to happen among our whole culture and what we are tolerating and what we shouldn't be tolerating. And that's
And
I think you're right when you said, people need to get involved. They really do need to get involved. And there was a great example of this from someone who ran a women's conference here in the state of Maine, and there were 500 women there, and they were there mainly because of the abortion issue. And the person who was leading the conference asked all of the women to stand up. And she had three questions for them. And the first question to this 500 women was, did you vote in the last election? And a bunch sat down. The second question, do you know who your state senator or your state representative is because they're your voice in Augusta. They represent your views. Do you know who they are? And a whole bunch more sat down. And her final question was, have you ever helped a pro-life candidate to any degree? Now, they're there at this conference because they care about
Yeah.
this issue. 500 women. And have you given them money? Have you put a lawn sign out? Have you driven them door to door? Have you done anything in any way to help a pro-life candidate? There were 5 women left
wow.
standing.
Wow.
5 out of
Wow.
500. So, we are the problem. We can blame the
Hmm.
politicians all we want. We can point fingers, but we really need to look in the mirror.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Is that not enough people are involved, and that's just it's a crazy example, though. The idea that we went from 500 to only 5 who had participated to that
5.
level, and it's interesting. I remember going out and trying to get my first time running. I failed to be a clean election candidate because I couldn't get enough $5 contributions initially in the first. You have to get it by like April something, and I didn't get enough of them. But part of the reason was I would go and I would get the Republicans who were willing to like sign, get me on the ballot, really excited that I was running. But then you ask them for a $5 contribution, and they're like, no, I don't give money to politics. And it's like, it's $5. How many times have you lost $5 you don't even remember in your life? And
Yeah.
to be unwilling to give, and even for people, this is one of the examples I'm thinking of is like a couple that I know that had been clients at one point when I'd worked at the bank, and like they thought really highly of me, and they really wanted me to get elected, but they wouldn't help at that level. And so it's really sad, you know what I mean, to see So how little involvement there is. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. I had a pastor, Travis Carey, from Calvary Chapel, Greater Portland, talking about the fact that, I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast or if he and I had mentioned it prior to, but like I've heard that somewhere around 30 million evangelical Christians, for instance, are either unregistered or just don't vote in elections. And like, think about like how much of an impact it would be if we had a higher turnout among that community, especially for people. These are people that can, agree with our values and what that would do to policy. And I think it's really interesting to think about. But yeah, the fact how few people are actually actively engaged and know what's going on is obviously something that we need to fix and we need to change, and we need to encourage people. You got to be more educated. You've got to know more about what's going on in your state, which is, again, why this podcast exists. So I want to give a shout out. A friend of mine, David Patrick on X, finally had the opportunity to catch an episode and threw that in the chat. So thanks for tuning in, David. I'm sure there's plenty more things that we could keep going, but we're going to try to keep it to an hour, and we're a little over an hour. And so I want to be sensitive to your time, you guys' time. Anything else you'd like to say before we kind of take it out?
Yeah, I'll jump in just real quick. The last answer Heather gave was great on that question. We talked about education and all that. When I worked in my previous position, I often went to the Maine Right to Life, which is mainrighttolife.org website, because there's just great information there. There's memes and posters and statistics and studies, and you could spend a whole day there, Chuck. So I'll leave you guys with that it's just a really good resource if you want to know the truth about what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, and I think I'll just kind of mention a couple of things, because I feel like part of the problem in the conversation, again, is that people, definitely the people on the left, are not being honest about the whole conversation, right? And the reality is, like, when they talk about, one of the questions that needs to be asked, right? And I sometimes, this is not to you guys, I think but like, if we really care about the woman, right? If our thing is about protecting the rights of the woman, we need to ask questions about how many women are getting abortions because they feel pressured to, because they feel like they don't have the appropriate support, because they don't. Because maybe they want to or would want to, but they're not getting the support that they need from people, or in fact, on the other side, they're getting pressure from other people that they need to get rid of this baby. And that's one of the areas where I had done some study, and again, I maybe this is something that's on the website, and I'll have to go and take a look. But I had heard from one of the studies that have been done that 75% of women say that get an abortion say that they had pressure from the father or their parents to get the abortion, and that 50 or a little over 50% said that was a significant factor in them making the decision to get an abortion. And so when we talk about and then there's also the fact that I know I have friends who worked for crisis pregnancy centers, which, contrary to popular belief, they don't just sit there and just try to force and manipulate people not to have abortions. They instead are encouraging the women that they actually do have other options, and that let's explore those options, and but on top of that, like, that's half of what they do, is work with women who are considering an abortion but aren't sure what to do and need some help. That's half of what they do. The other half of what they do is work with the women who have already had abortions and are dealing with the aftermath of that. Like, let's one of the things that has to be mentioned in this conversation is there a serious psychological and spiritual impact, mental health impact on women who have these abortions, because regardless of what the left would like us to believe, that this has an impact on people, because we know in our spirit, in our soul, that this is wrong. And you hear these stories about women waking up, or having nightmares about their baby crying, that the baby that they never had, and all these things, because this is still impacting them so many years into the future. I had a friend who actually helped me go door to door, and we were talking about the issue of abortion, and I didn't even think, right? And one of the other people that was in the room asked him, in the car, I should say, asked him, like, what are your thoughts on the issue of abortion? And he shared that he had pressured his wife into having multiple abortions before they did end up later on having some children, some girls, but that he even cited, he's like, and I think that is what ruined my marriage. And he ended up getting divorced, and now he's a single man in his 60s. Great guy. But he recognized, like, he believes ruined his marriage because of the impact that it had on him and his wife. This is still guilt.
The number for abortion, probably Heather knows more than I do, but the number for abortion regret is like 65-75% of people that get an abortion have regret.
Yes.
But
it's extremely high.
Yeah, and so on the other side of that, it's like, okay, then what's behind this? Because most of the things that are being pushed by the left are being pushed for monetary reasons, right? There's money involved. They want to claim that it's for this issue, right? But kind of, and then I guess this will be the last question, and then I'll take us out. If you have an answer to this, because I think it's worth exploring, and I could give my thoughts, but like, what is the push? Behind this death cult, we'll call it, but like, what is the push for there to be more abortions? Because there definitely is a push from Planned Parenthood and other places. And why are they doing that if it's not that they just love and care for these women and they're trying to protect their rights?
Well, go back to Margaret Sanger. She was very strongly in favor of abortion, to abort those people, those kinds. And, eugenics, it was a big factor in the first place. So you can look at the White Rose coalition, and you can look at all kinds of information from the past. I don't know that it's gone too far from that. I do know that, they do make money too from this. Obviously, it's a big business. It's millions and millions of dollars. And David Dilaudid had the undercover videos showing that they're harvesting and selling the body parts.
Yep.
So it's there's a lot more to this than I think people realize. And it's now, what's sad to me is it's become more than the baby's an inconvenience. It's now down to gender selection. So I know someone that I used to work with who has a daughter and a son, and come to find out she had a baby in between the boy and the girl. She had the girl first, and she wanted to have one of each, and she found out she was pregnant with another girl, and she aborted the girl.
Wow.
So this is how they have been able to normalize abortion. Yep. It's not, they just don't have this value for life that we should have. Yep. And we have a lot of work to do. Yeah. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, Heather's on the right track. I mean, I agree with what she's saying. And, whether God is your, who you look to, or whether America, when America is highly functioning, it does great things. It invents, it populates, it helps other countries in a positive way. And so, I don't know if I understand all this, but it's all about breaking down the family, the social norms. It's just so complicated. It's probably way over my head, but it's all about just doing your own thing. You think back to World War II, and people that were 18 years old went and, fought a war. And now you have people that age that literally can't function in society. So it's kind of working, but I don't think it's too late. And like Heather said, we have a lot of work to do, and probably conversations like this are really helpful to get the word out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. Yeah. So that leads me to, my kind of like wrap up, which is, as always, there's a call to action, right? Like, we talked a lot of ways about how you can get involved, but why do we create this content? We create this content because we think we need to create more digital content to help advance the conversation and get our message out there in front of people. That's why we do this. Now, you have a part to play in that. There will be shorter videos that will be released after this, because not everybody's got time to watch an hour and 15-minute episode, especially when I'm running 3 episodes a week the last couple of weeks. So that will peel back back to more like 2 episodes a week, I think, going forward, which was the initial intent. We've just had some guests that I wanted to get on, and some of them were timely fashions. But your role, you can help by liking, sharing, and subscribing to this content. We are on all the different platforms, so you can find at Muddy Waters me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify as just Muddy Waters, and Apple Podcasts and Rumble. So we're everywhere. Find us on your preferred platform or wherever you're going to try to share our information to other people on their preferred platform. One of the things that the X community, I love the X community, especially the Pine Tree Patriots that are part of this process, but a lot of people are not on X. And so we got to get this content shared in other places, and the good stuff that we're finding, because X is a free speech platform. Facebook is kind of trying to pretend to move in that direction, but X is, but we need to get that content into the places where people consume their information. And that for most people is going to be like TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Younger people, TikTok and Instagram; older people, Facebook. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, and see us again next week. I think we're going to be having a Maha kind of style conversation with a health coach, a certified health coach, Jason Gutman, who will be on the show, and it'll be a really great conversation to talk about what's happening with our food, and hopefully how RFK is going to really help move us forward. So thank you all for watching. Thank you, Mike and Heather, for joining us and
Thanks,
adding
Chuck.
to the conversation, helping get some information out to people. If you haven't already, go to it's mainrighttolife.org. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Go ahead. And Maine spelled out, right? MAINE.
Yep. Yeah. And we're on Facebook,
right.
and we're on X, Twitter too.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. And we'll see you all again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.